The conference room fell silent the instant the final consultant closed a leather folder, pushed it across the polished table, and calmly recommended destroying everything she had spent 18 years building. 20 highly paid experts had reached the same conclusion. Sell the company. Lay off nearly 4,000 employees. Walk away before the losses buried her forever. The CEO stared through the glass walls toward the factory where generations of families had built their lives, and for the first time in her career, she wondered if success had been nothing more than borrowed time. Then, from the back of the room, the only person who had not been invited to speak quietly looked up from repairing a broken coffee machine and realized every expert in the room had overlooked the one thing that mattered most: that if you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing family and never miss another emotional story. Corinne Mercer had never imagined that the company carrying her family name would become the subject of its own funeral. Mercer Industrial Systems had survived recessions, supply shortages, changing technology, and fierce international competition. Her grandfather had started the business with one rented warehouse and a single welding torch. Her father had expanded it into one of the country's most respected manufacturers of specialized emergency equipment. Corinne inherited it after years of working her way through every department instead of simply accepting the title waiting for her. She knew every production line, remembered birthdays of workers who had been with the company for decades, and believed loyalty was measured by actions rather than speeches. Yet the previous 18 months had shaken everything she believed. Contracts had disappeared. Investors demanded impossible returns. New competitors flooded the market with cheaper products. Every financial report looked worse than the one before it. The consulting firm she hired represented the brightest business strategists money could buy. 20 specialists spent 6 weeks interviewing managers, analyzing costs, reviewing forecasts, and measuring risks. Their presentation was polished, logical, and supported by hundreds of charts. Every calculation pointed toward the same painful conclusion. The company could no longer compete. Selling its patents while they still had value would protect shareholders. Closing factories immediately would prevent deeper losses. Thousands would lose their jobs, but the experts insisted that emotion could not interfere with mathematics. Corinne listened carefully because she respected knowledge. Still, every recommendation felt strangely empty. The numbers were flawless, yet something inside her refused to believe that thousands of hard-working people could simply become statistics. She searched the faces around the room. Executives avoided eye contact. Department heads silently accepted the inevitable. Even her closest advisors looked emotionally exhausted. Everyone had surrendered before the final decision had even been signed. At the back of the room stood Rowan Fletcher, a quiet maintenance technician who had been asked to repair the conference room coffee machine after it stopped working during the presentation. Rowan was a single father raising his 12-year-old son after losing his wife to a sudden illness years earlier. Life had taught him how quickly everything familiar could disappear. Between caring for his son, working overtime, and helping elderly neighbors whenever he could, he rarely attracted attention. Most executives knew him only as the dependable man who somehow fixed problems no one else noticed. While tightening the final screw inside the coffee machine, Rowan had accidentally overheard the presentation. He had no degree from prestigious universities. He had never worn expensive suits or spoken at business conferences. Yet he spent every day walking through every corner of the company, listening to workers, observing production, noticing details invisible to people who only visited during scheduled meetings. As the consultants packed their laptops, Rowan quietly asked whether he could say one thing before leaving. Several executives frowned immediately. One consultant smiled politely, assuming the interruption would last only seconds. Corinne, emotionally drained and curious for any fresh perspective, nodded. Rowan did not challenge their intelligence. He simply explained that every recommendation assumed the company was failing because its products had become uncompetitive. From what he had seen on the factory floor, that was not the real problem. Customers still loved the products. workers still believed in the mission. The failure began much earlier, long before manufacturing even started. He described delivery trucks sitting idle for hours because scheduling software constantly assigned impossible routes. He mentioned warehouses storing identical parts in 3 different buildings while essential components repeatedly ran out. He explained how engineers and technicians stopped sharing ideas because every suggestion required endless approval forms. He pointed out that experienced employees spent more time entering reports than improving production. Every delay created another delay until customers blamed the product instead of the broken system behind it. The room became unusually quiet. The consultants insisted those operational issues had already been included in their models. Rowan gently smiled and admitted they probably had, but he wondered whether anyone had spent a full week working alongside ordinary employees before deciding the company itself had no future. Corinne asked him one unexpected question. If he were sitting in her chair, what would he do first? Rowan answered without hesitation. He would stop asking what should be removed and start asking what had once made people proud to work there. The simplicity of the answer unsettled everyone. Instead of signing the closure documents that afternoon, Corinne postponed the decision for 30 days. The consultants privately considered it emotional hesitation. Investors called it dangerous optimism. Financial media criticized the delay. Yet Corinne spent the following month doing something she had not done in years. She walked every department without an entourage. She ate lunch with assembly workers. She rode delivery trucks. She listened instead of speaking. Rowan never acted like a hero or advisor. He simply answered questions honestly whenever she asked. She discovered employees who had developed cost-saving improvements nobody had reviewed. She found supervisors spending entire mornings completing paperwork that no customer would ever see. She learned talented mechanics repaired outdated machines using homemade solutions because replacement approvals required months. She noticed departments competing against each other instead of working together because bonuses rewarded individual numbers rather than shared success. Every discovery confirmed Rowan's quiet observations. The greatest weakness was not the company's products. It was the walls built between the people creating them. Corinne cancelled dozens of unnecessary reporting requirements. Cross-department meetings replaced endless email chains. Workers received direct access to decision-makers. Experienced technicians were invited to mentor younger engineers instead of being quietly ignored because they lacked university degrees. Suggestions that once disappeared inside administrative systems began reaching leaders within days. The changes looked almost invisible to outsiders. Inside the company, they changed everything. Employees who had spent years believing their voices no longer mattered suddenly found themselves shaping the future again. One afternoon, Rowan's son, Callum, visited the factory during a family event. Corinne watched the boy proudly tell classmates that his father could fix almost anything except broken hearts because those required kindness instead of tools. The innocent remark stayed with her long after the event ended. She realized businesses failed for the same reason many relationships failed. People became so busy proving themselves right that they stopped helping each other heal. 3 months later, the first major customer returned after seeing dramatic improvements in delivery times, then another, and another. Orders slowly increased. Investors who once demanded liquidation quietly withdrew their criticism. Industry magazines praised Mercer Industrial Systems for an unexpected turnaround, attributing success to bold restructuring and innovative leadership. Very few people knew the transformation began beside a broken coffee machine with one maintenance worker brave enough to respectfully question 20 experts. Corinne never corrected the headlines to make herself appear more impressive. Instead, she introduced a new leadership tradition. Every quarterly meeting began with frontline employees sharing observations before executives presented reports. Knowledge would never again flow in only one direction. 1 year later, the company celebrated its strongest growth in over a decade. More importantly, no factory had closed, families remained together, communities survived, thousands kept the livelihoods they feared had already vanished. During the anniversary celebration, Corinne walked through the production floor where workers applauded not because profits had returned, but because hope had. She found Rowan repairing another machine exactly as he always had done. He had refused promotions several times because his greatest priority remained raising Callum. Leadership, he believed, was not measured by office size but by responsibility. Corinne respected that decision more than any executive title. Without cameras or speeches, she thanked him privately for saving more than a business. He had reminded her that leadership required listening before deciding. He had shown her that experience without humility could become blindness. Most importantly, he proved that wisdom often wore ordinary work clothes instead of expensive suits. Years later, business schools studied Mercer Industrial Systems as an example of organizational recovery. Professors discussed strategic restructuring, operational efficiency, and cultural transformation. Students analyzed charts demonstrating improved productivity. Few case studies mentioned the maintenance worker, even fewer mentioned the frightened single father who hurried home every afternoon because his son always waited by the front window after school. Yet everyone whose life had been changed understood the real story. One courageous voice had interrupted a room full of certainty. One exhausted CEO had chosen curiosity instead of pride. One act of humble listening had protected thousands of futures. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not discovering a brilliant new answer, sometimes it is finally hearing the quiet truth that has been standing in the room all along. Before we reach the end of this journey, please leave a meaningful comment telling us what lesson stayed with you the most. Have you ever seen someone without power or status offer the solution everyone else overlooked? Your words may encourage another person who needs hope today. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. As the afternoon sun filled the factory with warm golden light, Corinne watched employees laughing together while families toured the building that still stood because one ordinary man refused to believe that people could be reduced to numbers. Rowan walked beside Callum toward the parking lot with grease still on his hands and quiet gratitude in his heart. Neither of them sought recognition. They simply carried home the satisfaction of knowing that kindness, humility, and the courage to speak with respect had accomplished what fear, pride, and endless reports never could. In the end, the company was not saved by the loudest voice in the room, but by the gentlest one, reminding everyone that hope begins the moment we choose to truly listen.